Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for people to tune in before I get started. So just bear with me a second. Just going to wait a couple of minutes for people to get tuned in before I get started. Okay, so I see that I have a couple of people, so I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. First, I want to find out if you all can see this particular ad that I'm about to play. Peace, shout out to John Pro. So, John Pro, if you can let me know if you can see and hear this ad, I'm just going to play a little section of it, and I just want you to let me know if you can see it and hear it. Okay, so hey, shout out to Covina, man. So were you all able to see that ad that I just played? I just played a small little segment of it. I just wanted to test that out to see if you can hear it and see it. So if you can let me know yes or no to that question, because I need to make sure that it works before I play it. And I would rather play it on here and just share my screen instead of just showing my phone. So I need to know, did you all hear that? Oh, yeah, you could hear it too. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this ad. There's been an ad circulated by this candidate who's running for Congress here in Maryland, and her name is Kimberly Klacik. She's running to replace Elijah Cummings. Right now, Kwesi Mfume is holding that spot. He's the Democratic candidate. So he's holding it until the election that comes up in November. And, for the rest of Elijah Cummings' term. And I think his term ends in January, and then, the new term starts. So right now you have two candidates in that, two mainstream candidates. You have Kim Klacik, the Republican, and she's going against Kwesi Mfume. As many people may know, Kwesi Mfume represented the 7th District at one time. He was also the head of the Congressional Black Caucus and the president and CEO of the NAACP. So he's running against this woman, and she's put out this ad that has gone viral. It's gone viral in part because of President Donald Trump. Donald Trump retweeted the ad on Twitter, and that has generated a lot of attention to this ad, and it's gone viral. And so what I'm going to do is play the ad and then share my thoughts about it. This is very important because it's in, Baltimore where I live. And also this is a nationwide story. This story is really bigger than just Baltimore, because not only because this particular ad went viral, but because it deals with this question of the meaning of Black Lives Matter, deals with the question of Democratic leadership in Black cities, and just the state of affairs in predominantly Black cities. So I'm going to go ahead and play this ad, and then I'll be back with my commentary. So let me share my screen, and I want to thank you all for tuning in. Do you care about Black lives? If you have Black lives in my town, I can prove it. Welcome. And I got guaranteed you.
The Baltimore poverty rate is over 20%. Homicide, drug, and alcohol deaths are skyrocketing in our city. Do you believe Black Lives Matter? I do. The vast majority of crime in Baltimore is perpetrated against Black people, who make up 60% of the population. So why do we care about our community? The Democrat Party has betrayed the Black people in Baltimore. If the politicians walk the streets like I do, they would see exactly how their policies and corruption affects us. They don't want to see it. They don't want you to see this. When any Baltimore neighborhood asks this question, do you want to defend the police?
No. No, absolutely not. I hate next time I go to Baltimore City. I am keep the kind of police officer reverse it. So we're not going to hold it.
What do you mean defend the police? How do you defend your city, your community?
That is the lunatic.
It's not just Baltimore. The worst place for a Black person to live in America is a Democrat-controlled city. It's 2020. Name a blue city where Black people's lives would not be better. Try. I leave. Look at this. How are children supposed to live here and play here? Democrats and Black people are students. They think they can control us forever. That they want the man better and will keep running for them forever. You started with your vote for families and our kids. I'm the president and I'm the Congress and I actually care about Black lives. I love Black lives matter. Our community does. Baltimore matters. And Black people don't have to go through that.
Okay, so you all saw that ad, and hopefully you all could hear this, the ad. You know, I ran a quick test, and most people said that they could hear it. So what I'm going to do is provide my brief commentary, my brief response to this video. You know, there's several things that have to be pointed out in response to this video. You know, the first thing I'll say is this, like, she made valid points about the problems. She did a great job of describing the problems in Baltimore City, the problems of poverty, the problems of violence in the city, you know, other problems like abandoned homes. You know, that's something that cannot be ignored in this city. That's a major problem throughout the city of Baltimore. So she did a great job of articulating what the problems are. And anybody can do that. Anybody that has, you know, a pair of eyes and ears can see and hear the problems in this city. It doesn't take anything for anyone to do that. The question is not about whether or not you can identify the problems in the city. The real question is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to correct the problems? What are your policy proposals to address these very important issues? That's the question. You can talk about how bad the Democrats are and how the Democrats haven't done anything, but at the end of the day, it's about what kind of policies you have in place, or what's your agenda to address these issues, and how can you as a member of Congress actually address these day-to-day issues in Baltimore City? That's the question. And this ad provided zero policy proposals. This ad provided zero solutions to any of those problems. All it did was blame Democrats for the state of affairs in Baltimore City. And anybody can point fingers at anyone. You know, it's not about pointing fingers. It's about how do we correct these problems. And this woman doesn't have a clue as to how to correct these problems. You know, this woman, you know, it's important for people to understand like how this woman got so prominent. You know, one of the things that she did was take a lot of photographs and video of trash and abandoned buildings in Baltimore, and she put these out on Twitter and stuff like that. And President Donald Trump saw these images and he retweeted them, and he also used those images to trash and disparage Baltimore, to attack Baltimore City. And here you have a black woman that's aiding and abetting, Donald Trump in bashing Baltimore City, and she actually expects the people of Baltimore to vote for her. And what I'm going to do is pull up some of the comments that Donald Trump said in response to that. And then I'll go back into this ad and address some of the other things that she was talking about. So if you can just bear with me a second. Yeah, so in response to and to as a response to those photographs and some issues that had come up between Elijah Cummings, the late congressman for this district, Donald Trump put out these tweets. He first of all he bashed Elijah Cummings, talked about how he was a brutal bully, complaining about him shouting and screaming at people that work for Border Patrol. And then, he went on to say that his Baltimore district is far worse and more dangerous than the southern border. And I'm going to share this so you all can see this real quick, so you can see what I'm reading from. Yeah, so he's pointed out how Donald Trump pointed out how Elijah Cummings' district is worse than the southern border and is more dangerous. He described Baltimore as a disgusting rat and rodent infested mess. And he went on to say if he spent more time in Baltimore, maybe he could clean up this very dangerous and filthy place. And then he went on to say, why is so much money sent to Elijah Cummings' district when it's considered the worst run and most dangerous anywhere in the United States? No human being would want to live there. Where is all the money going? How much is stolen? Investigate this corrupt mess immediately. So those are the tweets that Donald Trump put out in response to these comments and, images that this black woman put out about Baltimore. So you had this black woman attacking Baltimore, and she actually expects the people of Baltimore to actually vote for her. And one thing that's very important to point out is that she's not even a resident in Baltimore. She doesn't even live in the 7th congressional district, from what I understand. In Maryland, under the law, all you have to do is live in Maryland in order to run for any congressional seat. You don't have to live in the district that you're running for. So this woman doesn't even live in Baltimore. She doesn't even live in the 7th district. She doesn't know what it's like in Baltimore. All she's done is gone to the most rundown areas of the city and highlighted those to paint this narrative that Baltimore is a disaster. And one thing that has to be pointed out about a lot of the imagery that she used, of course, those are real images of Baltimore, of certain areas of Baltimore, but that's not what Baltimore, Baltimore in its entirety. Baltimore is a beautiful city. There's so many things going on here that it's a rich culture, it's diversity. You have affluent areas, you have middle-class, hardworking areas. All of Baltimore does not look like those images that she presented. So I had to point that out. And there's some other things, so the other thing is this, so I pointed out, for instance, on this page, there's this page called Baltimore City Voters, and there's another page called Baltimore Politics on Facebook. And I talked about this particular ad, and I talked about, as I told you all, that she doesn't really discuss the actual policies that she plans to implement to address any of these problems. So people said, well, hey, you need to go visit her website to find out what these policies are. She has all these policies outlined on her website to address all these problems. So I went to her website this evening, and there's not much there either. It's very, it's very limited in what she's talking about with these policies. And I'm going after I look at these, I'll go back to some of these other points that she raised, and then just talk about the real purpose behind her running for this position in the first place. So you can bear with me a second. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. So let's see. Yeah, so here's her campaign, her website, it has her campaign issues, and she talks about education. One of the things that she's talking about is supporting school choice and vouchers and tax credits for homeschooling and all that kind of stuff. Number one, vouchers and quote unquote school choice, all that is charter schools and diverting funds to private education. These voucher programs, all they do is take money away from public schools that are already in desperate need for increased funding. That's what they do, these voucher programs do. And they only benefit a small minority of the people that need a quality education. Charter schools, while they have some benefits, they are not a solution to the problem facing our young people who need a quality education. In order to have a quality education for our young people, we need politicians, local politicians, to implement the recommendations of the Kerwin Commission here in Baltimore. That's a commission that conducted an investigation and did some research and, presented proposals to fundamentally increase the quality of education, not only in Baltimore, but throughout the state of Maryland. And what we need is to have the funding that the Kerwin plan calls for in order to improve our schools so that our children will have a quality education. A lot of the problems that we see in our city stem from inadequate education. When people don't have quality education, when people don't have job opportunities, what they end up doing is getting caught up in the criminal lifestyle. That's what happens. And that's what we see here in Baltimore. So this proposal that this woman is presenting on her website is not a real solution to the problem of failing schools in Baltimore City. And then she highlights other items like the Second Amendment, talking about the right of people to protect their families against criminals and all that kind of stuff. I don't have any problem with, people having the legal right to bear arms and all that kind of stuff. But that's not any kind of solution to address the crime in Baltimore City. And, when people emphasize, the Second Amendment, I support the Second Amendment, but I believe that we need to have reasonable restrictions on people's right to bear arms. We need to have restrictions, especially in a city like Baltimore, where people have access to more guns than they have access to a quality education. The last thing that we need is to flood the market with more guns. All that equals is more violence in our city. We've seen all these examples of, school shootings in other parts of the country and all that kind of stuff. And we see how all these loopholes, these gun show loopholes and all that other stuff have resulted in more guns being flooded in Baltimore, more people having access to weapons that are used to kill people. But yet this is a woman who professes to be so concerned about inner city violence in Baltimore. And, one thing that I noticed on her list of priorities, she talks about, socialism as a problem. She condemns all these programs, various government programs. And this is what she says. She says socialism is a massive amounts of money paid by you, the taxpayer, into government coffers controlled entirely by bureaucrats. And she talks about how these bureaucrats empower themselves and exercise control over every aspect of your life. And talks about how they neglect basic needs and et cetera, et cetera. The fact of the matter is, in order to address these problems that exist in Baltimore, problems of poverty, you're going to have to rely on government funds to address that. Nothing in here talks about addressing poverty in a direct kind of way. You have to have government programs to address poverty. There has to be some kind of redistribution of wealth and resources in order to lift people out of poverty. We need to have more funds, again, devoted to quality public education. We need job opportunities. We need to have guaranteed livable wages for all people. And we need to have quality jobs available for people. And, those are programs that this woman would probably call socialist and stuff like that. But that's the way that you address poverty. So she doesn't really offer anything here. And then she emphasizes protecting the rights of the unborn. I assume that deals with, the right to life and all that kind of stuff. And she talks about an economic development project, which is about bringing medical institutions to Baltimore to create jobs and stuff like that. I think that is a good idea to have economic development. But, those types of proposals alone will not help deal with a lot of the problems that she was citing in that particular ad. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and look at some of the other things that she was talking about. One point that she kept making is about Democrats, about democratically controlled cities and stuff like that. These deep-rooted problems are not problems that can be simply changed overnight by switching the parties in power. It's not about that. It's not about, there's nothing that, the mere election of a Republican candidate is going to do to automatically change these problems that we see in Baltimore City or other cities throughout the country. A lot of these problems are deeply rooted. A lot of these problems go beyond just the power of the local government to immediately address. They deal with large problems such as the war on poverty. There needs to be a real war on poverty. It deals, if you don't address poverty, if you don't address institutionalized racism, these problems will continue to exist no matter which party is in power, no matter what candidate is elected. And I'm sure that if this woman were to be elected, nothing at all would change in Baltimore. In fact, it would only get worse in Baltimore. The other thing that I have to talk about is this whole black on black violence red herring is constantly put out here to deflect away from the core issue of police brutality. And essentially that's what you have in this particular ad. This woman is equating, using the slogan Black Lives Matter to apply to the inner city violence that plagues Baltimore City. Basically using that to focus on the violence in the city and stuff like that. And nobody's saying that the violence doesn't have to be addressed. That is a major problem, but don't use the slogan Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff to deflect and have people focused on inner city violence. And that's a huge problem that I have with this ad. Suggesting that these politicians and Democrats don't care about violence in the city. When it's, they're doing everything that they're doing a lot to try to address the problem. Is it enough? Absolutely not. Whatever they're doing right now is a complete failure. It is a failure. And part of the problem is we have to elect new leadership. And it's not just about, the party or whatever. We need to elect people that have concrete plans to deal with the root causes of the violence in our city if we want to address it. But to misappropriate that slogan about Black lives to focus solely on the inner city violence, again, that's a deflection. And it doesn't deal with one of the key issues that's also important in this city, and that's police reform. I mean, we had a rebellion here after the killing of Freddie Gray in the city. We had the Justice Department come into Baltimore and implement various reforms. So that is a very important issue. And what has happened is that very important issue of police brutality is being drowned out by, this focus on inner city violence. And it's also being drowned out by this ridiculous, silly slogan, defund the police. I think that by far that's one of the most ridiculous slogans that any political movement has ever come up with, because we see this woman is able to manipulate that slogan to attack Democrats and to make people on the left seem like they're loony and they're ridiculous. And that's a big problem. Not only is she using that slogan in her ads, you have President Trump using them in his political ads to make it seem as if Democrats are promoting anarchy, to make it seem as if Democrats are undermining law and order in cities. And, that slogan, defund the police, is a ridiculous slogan. I mean, they need to come up with a better slogan, because here we are in a city such as Baltimore, one of the most violent cities, as the woman points out in her ad, and people are talking about defunding the police. I mean, defunding the police, that slogan sounds absolutely absurd under those circumstances, given the fact that for the past 5 years, we've had over 300 people murdered each year. And and it seems like right now we're on pace to exceed the number of murders that we had last year. So that slogan needs to be changed. That slogan is, on its face, is just plain stupid. And, the mere fact that these Republicans are able to use that slogan in these ads just shows how idiotic that slogan is. Now, I understand like the intent behind it. And I think that there's some intelligent ideas behind that slogan, like making sure that, funds are redirected in certain ways to address the causes of crime in communities. And also, the idea of, having certain duties taken from the police department and put in the hands of other professionals to address those issues, like mental health or, domestic issues and all that kind of stuff. And I can understand that, but that slogan is not a wise slogan. And then you have, these people that are really extreme in their advocacy, and they call for like, a ridiculous amount of cuts to police departments. And some of those cuts simply don't make sense in a city like Baltimore that's plagued with violence, that's plagued with open air drug markets. And the thing is, you have this woman able to swoop in here and manipulate that slogan in order to push her agenda. So that's something that has to be pointed out. Again, this issue of violence in our city is very important. But for her to divert attention away from the Black Lives Matter by using that slogan in this ad, to use it to focus on, the inner city violence, I just think that that's in poor taste and all that kind of stuff. And to suggest that a lot of these leaders in Baltimore don't care about these issues, I just think that that's blatantly false. To suggest that they don't care about Black lives, when I see a lot of these elected officials at these visuals for people who have died in violence, some of them like, Brandon Scott, for instance, who won the Democratic nomination for mayor. He's been actively participating in all these different nonviolent, these marches to stop the violence in Baltimore City, the ceasefire movement, and then the 300-man march and all that kind of stuff. So these people are concerned, that you can say that, they're definitely concerned about Black lives. So I think that that's a blatant misrepresentation. But on the question of whether or not they're effective, I think that that's valid because, they haven't been effective, with this violence for the past 5 years and even before then. You can't say that they're effective by any measure. But if you want people to elect you, you got to come up with real solutions to these problems instead of just sound bites where you're attacking Democrats. Another thing is this, like, the root causes of these problems, the problem of violence has to be addressed, like the lack of quality education, the lack of job opportunities, the mental health issues, the destruction of the family life in communities. We need to have mentor programs. We need to make sure that our young people have scholarships and they have the resources that they need in order to be successful and to thrive. And, in her mind, she would probably consider such programs socialist and all that kind of stuff. She offered nothing in her ad to deal with these issues. And, another thing that I have to address before I check out your comments is this. In this particular ad, she's walking through a Black city. She's walking through this Black city, Baltimore, and she's acting like she knows the city and she's familiar with the city. As I said before, she's not even from the city. She doesn't even live here. She doesn't even live in the district that she wants to represent. And as far as I'm concerned, that undermines anything that she's talking about. Another thing is this, like, what sense would it make for a predominantly Black city to vote for somebody like her when she's a Trump supporter? A Trump supporter, a man who bashed Baltimore specifically. You all heard that quote that I read earlier, where he's bashing Baltimore, calling it rat-infested and, all this other stuff. And not only does he bash Baltimore, but he bashes Black people, not only with his words, but more importantly with his policies. His voter suppression, his attacking affirmative action, his disparaging remarks about Black protesters, his history of discriminating against African-American tenants, people that are trying to get housing, his current statements about keeping affordable housing out of suburban communities, basically talking about keeping Black people out of those communities. How can any Black person support him? And how in the hell can such a Black person that supports a racist like Donald Trump actually expect Black people to vote for her? She talks about, she's trying to present this image like she's so down with Black people. Another thing is this, like, and I know it's not a very important issue, but it's something that has to be mentioned. She wants to represent this Black community and pretend like she's so down with Black people. And she, like so many of these other people, is married to a white man. And I'm going to just show this to you real quick. She's married to this white man. So that's like the cherry on top of the whole thing, man. She's married to a white guy and, she's supports a white racist Republican president, Donald Trump. So I don't think that anybody is going to vote for, she may get a few votes, but most people got sense enough not to vote for this woman. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So most people have sense enough not to vote for her. She has very little chance of being elected. It's highly unlikely that she will win. And there's some quick facts that are pointed out. And, one thing, from what I understand, there hasn't been a Republican that's, it says a Republican has never represented Maryland's 7th district. So, and that district includes Baltimore City and parts of Baltimore and Howard counties. So, it's highly unlikely that this woman will win, and that brings me to the very last point that I wanted to raise about this before I check out your comments. And that's this. This woman knows that she's not going to win. This campaign is not about her winning the actual congressional seat. It's all about raising her profile. It's all about, increasing her opportunities. Perhaps she's seeking a position with the Trump administration, in his, some kind of appointee to one of these agencies or something like that. Perhaps that's what she's seeking, an appointment to one of these top agencies in the federal government or some kind of job with the Trump administration. And that looks like that's the direction she's heading in. This is not about her trying to really help the people of Baltimore. So, yeah, I just had to share my thoughts about this. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And I will look at your comments. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Shout out to John Pro, Covina Man, Cohen Davis. Oh, so somebody said they couldn't hear it, the audio. Man, it's like I played it earlier to see if people could hear it. And people said that they could hear it, but I guess not. But anyway, if you couldn't hear it, I will have the link in the description box so that you can check it out for yourself. But basically in the ad, she's walking around Baltimore. She's looking at abandoned buildings, and she's talking about the crime, the murder, the drugs, the poverty, the abandoned buildings. And she's talking about how the Democrats haven't done anything for the past 50 plus years in Baltimore City. And she's talking about how Black Lives Matter. And she's saying that, the city doesn't care nothing about, the elected officials don't care anything about Black lives and all that kind of stuff. And basically she's walking through town in this red dress with red high heels on, looking completely out of place in Baltimore, looking like she's just dropped in there to visit and stuff like that, to show off for this particular ad. She doesn't even look like she fits in that environment. So yeah, that's the ad in a nutshell for those of you who couldn't see it. Yeah, so Kavina Man said the audio was bad. So I hope that y'all could check it out. The link will be in the description box. Okay, so her website says that Trump has an agenda to help Black people. And Trump doesn't have an agenda. And what I was going to do, like I may do a video where I go do a side-by-side comparison of the Trump's agenda to Joe Biden's agenda. I may do that. Yeah, and you're right, Covina, man. It's not about getting elected. She knows that she has no chance of getting elected. She's probably looking for, again, a position with Trump or some kind of position on Fox News or one of these other right-wing networks, or to be like one of these honorary coons on one of these shows. You know how they get somebody up there to spout some ridiculousness to defend Trump's policies and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, so Elaine is right. Every city has bad parts, and there are a lot of problems that need to be addressed in Baltimore. And part of the problem is people just keep, electing these recycled candidates and stuff like that. And you got all these politicians that aren't really, you got too many that aren't really concerned about improving the plight of people. They are only social climbers. They're trying to look for the next come up, for the next opportunity to go up higher and higher on the ladder of success. So they're really not about trying to improve the plight of people. Unfortunately, many of them are insincere. Many of them are narcissistic. Many of them are just about self-promotion, and they're not really doing anything for the people of Baltimore. They are servants and slaves of the corporations and the developers and all that kind of stuff. And you got some of these politicians that represent predominantly Black communities, but they don't really represent predominantly Black people. They represent their white donors and their white handlers and their white supporters that fund these campaigns, because unfortunately many of these campaigns are many times Black people are not making donations to these candidates. A lot of Black people may vote, but they're not donating to candidates to the degree as some of these affluent white people and stuff like that. And as a result of that, these politicians mainly listen to these white interests. And another thing is this, like a lot of these special interest groups that, endorse candidates and stuff like that, most of them are not Black. The overwhelming majority of them are not Black. They don't, Black issues are not their priority. Many of them are run by these white liberals and stuff like that, whose agenda is not necessarily aligned with the Black agenda. And because of that, you have these candidates that are more accountable to these white interests than they are to Black communities. And that's why you see a lot of neglect in communities. As I was canvassing, when I was a candidate for city council, I talked to many people. I talked to hundreds of people. And many of the Black people, the people on the Black side of town, basically told me that our current city councilman doesn't even represent them. He's non-responsive to their issues. But then when I went to the white side of town, they were telling me what a fantastic job he's doing. So, that's an example of what I'm talking about. And that's why we see a lot of these continuing problems. It's not about just the party. It's about what kind of people you have in there and what their positions are on the issues that matter to us. And too often, we're just not a priority for them. And it's up to us to hold these people accountable. It's up to us to hold them accountable. And we need to do that way, way in advance, not just around election time and all that kind of stuff. We need to do it, well ahead of time. So in case you missed it, I want to show you my shirt. This is a coon-free zone over here. So, um, so we don't, give any passes to people like this woman. But anyway, let me continue on with your comments. Yeah, so Elaine said her message is the same as Kanye's. Yeah, I mean, it's the same old stuff, man. It's like, you hear this rhetoric. You had these people saying, get off the Democratic plantation and all this other stuff, just empty rhetoric and stuff. Yeah, I mean, there has to be a solution. The abandoned building problem in Baltimore is something that has to be addressed. Um, and unfortunately, you had several politicians who have done these videos where they're posing in front of these abandoned buildings. And after that, those politicians leave office, those same abandoned buildings are still in place. There is a failure in leadership. There is a failure in leadership, and that can't be denied. That's the reason why an ad like hers had so much power, even though she's not offering anything, even though her own agenda is very empty, very hollow, lacks any kind of substance. So I'm just going to read through more of your comments. Oh, so Oh, so Ashley Beckford, I'm not from. I got to check out your channel. So she said that I came in late. I just watched the ad. It brought tears to my eyes since I'm from Baltimore. I commented on the video. She's not the candidate we need. Exactly, she's not the candidate we need. And these problems in the city are, very depressing. These problems and conditions that exist in the city have to be addressed. And like one of the main problems that I see in Baltimore, like right in my immediate community, is these open air drug markets. Like you have like a block where you have these people literally just openly selling drugs right in front of the police. And you got the police station there and stuff like that. But they're not doing anything to really deter this activity. And you see like these drug addicts just hanging out all day, every day. And part of the problem is you got one of those methadone clinics in the area that's not maintaining, things, and they are creating a public nuisance, and they're creating a market for these drug dealers to feed off of. And this is not just a problem of the drug addiction issue and the drug selling. The problem escalates into violent situations often. So we have killings in this area, in this side of town, and throughout the city, as a result of this drug trading and as a result of other things. Um, every other day there's somebody dying in Baltimore. I was looking at, there's a group here called Ceasefire, and they have these sacred space rituals when somebody passes away. And every weekend they're booked up. They're booked up with all these sites that they have to go to have these sacred rituals because so many people are dying in this city. So yeah, there definitely is a lack of leadership in the city. And I tried to run for office. I didn't win this time, but I'm not going to give up on on trying to make a difference in this community, whether it's as a candidate, or a politician, or just an activist. But I'm going to do everything in my power to try to change things in this city. And that's what more of us need to do. And there are plenty of people that are putting in the work. There are plenty of uh, non-governmental organizations that are fighting to make a difference in this city. And we need more people to pitch in to address these problems. Instead of just waiting for some politician to save us, we need to look at the man and the woman in the mirror, and we have to realize that we are the change, like we've heard a million times. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. We are the change that we want to see in this world. And it's time for us to get out of the comfort of our homes and actually dig in the dirt and put in that work to improve this city and to improve the lives of our people, regardless of where you live. Yeah, so I'm going to keep, being engaged. I did, for people that don't know, I ran for city council. Um, had the primary in June. Another candidate won the primary, but I'm going to stay engaged. And this is only the beginning for me. But we have to do that. Like, you hear a lot of people here online talking about this politician's not doing this, they're not doing that. They talk about the need to push for reparations. Well, when I ran, I was the only candidate openly advocating for reparations. And we need you to run for office. If you see conditions in your community that need to be addressed that aren't being addressed by these politicians, you should run for office and make a difference. Yeah, so Ashley Beckford pointed out how we need something better than defund the police. She says that Black women and no one else is going for that, especially if you can't own guns or you need the cops to help fight during these domestic violence incidents and other crime. Yeah, and that's true. Hold on one second. I'll be right back. Yeah, so I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so I mean, definitely. I mean, like when I was canvassing as a candidate, you know, the number one thing that people were talking to me about, I asked them like, what are their top priorities? And the number one issue was crime. You can't address crime adequately if you are defunding the police. Like, and I understand, like I said before, I understand what they mean by that. But some of these people are going very far with that slogan. And just the slogan itself is a major turnoff to anybody in the community like Baltimore when they see all the crime and stuff that's going on. Don't nobody want to hear you talk about defunding the police when it's even hard to rely on. The police don't even have the resources that they need a lot of times to effectively police communities and to deal with the violence in communities. The people are not trying to hear you talk about that. The average people. I'm not talking about these college kids and all that kind of stuff, or the people that are on the left and all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm not completely against defunding the police, but I just think that slogan is not the best slogan to use in the world. Um, yeah, so I'm going to see what people. Yeah, so Ashley said, I can't even visit my family without seeing drug dealers and abandoned buildings everywhere. Yet there are areas that are beautiful. There are, like right here in this area where I live. I live in Northeast Baltimore. And in this section of Baltimore, you see on one side of this street called York Road, you have some areas where there are mansions, huge mansions and stuff like that, gated communities and stuff. And guess what? They're all, predominantly white, overwhelmingly white. Now you got a few little sprinkles of Negroes here and there in those communities, but for the most part, they're all white. And then the poorer communities in this area are predominantly black. And there's something wrong with that picture. Yeah, and then she did, like, I think that that's a good point, Ashley. I mean, it's like she was deceiving these older people into saying, well, hey, I'm not for that defunding the police, because she's not even telling them, what defund the police actually means and stuff like that. She's just running up in their face saying, defund the police. And that's what makes that slogan so problematic, because, first of all, it means different things to different people. Um, and when they hear it, they think you're going to take all the money from the police and stuff. It's just not a good slogan to use. It's just not the best slogan to use. And again, the fact that Donald Trump is running on that slogan and using it in his ads to make it seem like Democrats support quote unquote riots and disorder and chaos and stuff like that, and are going to leave people unsafe. He's playing on this racial animosity and all this fear that people have, and it's working, unfortunately. Yeah, and I think this is a great point too. She's not even she says that, Ashley says that she's not even a part of the community. The way she talks is absurd. The accent doesn't even sound like Maryland, let alone Baltimore. I was born there. I can tell she married outside. Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, this woman she was looking and acting like a white woman, a white woman that doesn't know anything about Baltimore. I mean, this woman just looked completely out of place. She doesn't even seem like she knows anything about Baltimore. She's not even from Baltimore. She hasn't even lived here in this district, in the whole district. But yet she wants to represent this district. And it's no way in hell she's going to beat Kwesi Mfume. You know, he's very popular. He has a long reputation in the city. You know, great name recognition. So it's an uphill battle for her to win. Some people said bottom shelf Brad. They're referring to her husband. And T-Boy said that was the worst political ad I've ever watched in my life. She disgusts me. Somebody said T-Boy said she disgusts him. Yeah, it's just like I wonder like why it seems to be the case that so many of these black women that are prominent in politics are often married to white men, you know, whether we're talking about Kamala Harris or we're talking about Susan Rice. You know, I heard that Susan Rice was married to a white man. And let me just check that out real quick because I keep hearing this. So let me see what her husband looks like. Yeah, so she's married to a white man too. And I just wonder about that. Like, why are so many of these prominent black women that are into politics married to white men so often? Yeah, so Ashley is saying one of the points that I made that she wants a job on Fox. Yeah, she definitely made Baltimore look like a failed state. All right, so let's see. Yeah, so Covina man made an interesting point. He said that no politician is going to promote stopping crime because in the future that politician will be blamed for mass incarceration. I mean, and I feel what you're saying, like, because that's what people are doing with Joe Biden and stuff, you know, saying that he supports. I mean, because of the crime bill, and I think that point about mass incarceration is valid. Like, you know, the complaint that the crime bill led to mass incarceration or helped it. You know, I encourage people again to read Michelle Alexander's book. You know, Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow, mass incarceration. I encourage you all to read that book so you can get more information about the impact of this. Um, you know, nonviolent offense. You know, the biggest thing with that, you know, with the you know, the crime bill and all that kind of stuff, and other sentencing disparities, is that it led to nonviolent drug offenders being mass incarcerated. And I just think that that has had a devastating impact on our communities. But I see your point, and I think that any candidate that's running for office, they have to address the question of crime, especially in a city like Baltimore. Um, that has to be addressed, and I don't think that, you know, locking up violent criminals is going to be something that people complain about. But I hear your point, and I think you make a valid point. Oh, so your family is on Edmondson Avenue, Ashley. So I'm wondering what part. So okay, I see they're over there. So you don't live in Baltimore anymore, I assume? Yeah, so Cohen made an interesting point. He said American voters en masse don't want to hear about policies and the issues. They want entertainment and performers for their politicians. You got to be a refined Ronald McDonald. You know what? And I think there's some truth to that. Like, you know, there is some truth in what you're saying because a lot of times, you know, these campaigns and stuff like that are just, at the end of the day, they're just popularity contests. It's about the likability factor, whether or not people like you. People are more concerned with somebody's family life than they are, in fact, concerned with their positions on issues. Um, and I've seen that in my own campaign, and how things worked out, and the person that was selected. It's a clear example of that. A big part of campaigns is about PR and presenting the right kind of marketing and packaging and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that that's a valid point. Like, because, like, I mean, I've seen presidential elections, for instance, where you had these debates between candidates and stuff like that. And a lot of times, the candidate that ends up winning is not the candidate that performed the best during those debates where they're talking about actual issues. For instance, in the race between Bush and Gore and Al Gore. I mean, during those debates, when you just look at the substantive issues, Al Gore defeated George Bush in a lot of those debates. But Al Gore also came across as a know-it-all and a prick and all that kind of stuff. So, so despite, providing the information and, stating the right policy positions on all these different issues, at the end of the day, he ended up losing the election. And you could also look at it, in terms of, some of the debates between Obama and Hillary Clinton. Some of those debates, Obama didn't perform all that well. Like, he didn't do a great job doing some of those debates. And he was the one that ended up winning the nomination. And even when you look at, Clinton versus Donald Trump, even in that situation, Donald Trump was not some great mind-blowing debater and had some great policy positions or anything like that. Donald Trump appeared to fear, he appeared to appeal to racism, and that's how he was able to win. So I think that you make a valid point about that. Yeah, this whole defund the police thing is just like, I just don't think that's, I'm not going to repeat myself, but I think y'all got the point about how I feel about that. Oh, so you said your channel will be refuting former things you said. Um, and you also done book reviews, Ashley. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have to check out your channel. I'm going to check it out. Yeah, I'm going to write down the name of your channel and check it out, because I do book reviews from time to time, and I'm a part of a book club here in Baltimore called Reading as Activism, and each month we read a new book, and most of our books are by Black novelists, but we have recently started to read some nonfiction as well. So if anybody's interested in joining that reading club, I encourage you to like our page on Facebook, and you can attend the meetings, because now, because of COVID, our meetings are taking place online. We're having Zoom meetings. So if you all are interested, I encourage you to like the page. And I'm going to pull it up real quick before I go and just place the link in the chat so that you all can like the page. So just give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to post the link to Reading as Activism, so you all can like that page. If you're in Baltimore, you can, or even if you're anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, you can participate. Yeah, so let me write down your page, and I'm going to check it out right after this. And yeah, so I want to thank you all for tuning in. You know, I truly appreciate it. I'm going to probably do one more live stream real quick tonight. But peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you for watching. Please rate, comment, subscribe, like the video, share the video, and hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. And I see that we have like 18 people watching. I'm going to ask you all to like the page. So I should have at least 18 likes by the time this is over with. So I appreciate you all offering your comments. Peace and blessings, everyone. Have a great evening.